Hello and welcome to an AVForums short video overview of the Rega Mercury pre-amplifier and Solis power amplifier. My name is Ed Selley. I'm the hi-fi editor for AVForums. Right, let's start with a small point of business. The Mercury is in shot, the Solis is not. Solis weighs the best part of 25 kilos. Even if I did want to extract it from my rack, and I can assure you that I don't, this old and much loved sofa probably isn't going to take kindly to me parking it on the arm. So it appears in lots of incidental shots, but it's not come out for the video, and you can complain vociferously about that if you choose to. But I dare say that if you have to lift one out yourself, you will understand. Right then, what we do have in shot is an I/O. Now, we've never done a video of the I/O, but it's a former AVForums product of the year. It remains the most affordable integrated amplifier that Rega makes. For a whisker over £400, it's a Class AB amp. You get a phono stage and some analog inputs. It's remote controlled. It sounds brilliant. I love the I/O. The Mercury and Solace are, in most reflections, or in most methods of looking at it, completely different. They come in two boxes. The Mercury does without a phono stage, we'll cover why. It has digital inputs, we'll also cover why. And it is reliant on the Solis for the actual gnarly business of amplification. But they are pretty much not the same thing. They even have different circuits in them, so on and so forth. This is not a beefed up version of this. This is different again. However, if you park them on top of each other, you can see that they're made by the same people. And even more peculiarly, if you sit down and listen to them, even though this is better in every single way, you can recognise that it's related to this as well. What gives? Anyway, right. The Mercury and Solace are, as I said, not related to the I/O. They are, if you like, a beefed up and enhanced version of an integrated amplifier that Rega makes called the Osiris, the largest integrated amplifier in the Rega range. The decision was taken to split them into two boxes to beef up their specification without the box in question becoming something you needed a forklift to move around. We'll start with the Mercury because it's here and I can point at it and so on and so forth. This is a preamplifier that operates exclusively in an analog domain in terms of how it adjusts volume and how the output functions, but it combines analog and digital inputs. The analog connections are one XLR input, four RCA line inputs, a tape loop. It outputs to RCA and XLR connections, and you'll find a matching set of those on the Solis. It then uses a digital board which is related to, but not the same as, the one in the Saturn Mark III CD player. It has two optical, two coaxial and one USB input. There is no Bluetooth. Bluetooth is not a Rega thing. This is quite an interesting digital board. It has a maximum PCM sampling rate of 24192, and as a first for a Rega product, it will handle DSD to DSD64. These are not the sort of numbers that get spec fanatics sweating under the collar. Rega makes no bones about the fact they don't chase that sort of thing. And the decoding that handles them is a pair of Wolfson WM8742 DACs. These are not new. They are very far from new. They are, however, still the DAC chip that Rega likes the best. Nothing about how these products have been designed and built has been done in such a way as to be the most, the biggest, the heaviest, so on and so forth. They are the absolute extension of what Rega feels matters in a product. So the digital board is designed with that in mind. It does the things that Rega feel are important. They make the very valid point and entirely correct point that there simply isn't very much beyond these sample rates doing the round in meaningful circulation. So it handles all the things that you would realistically want it to do. Another interesting point is that both the Mercury and the Solis, and we will come to the Solis in a moment, have XLR connections. XLR in and out on the Mercury and then XLR in on the Solis. Rega supplies an RCA connection and is adamant that these products do their best work over RCA. So that's how they prefer to use it. I've used them over both connections. I have to say I don't think it's night and day. I think it's also going to depend ever so slightly on what you're connecting them to. But nevertheless, performance over RCA is extremely impressive. The Solis power amplifier is also Very impressive indeed. As I say, it is the best part of 25 kilos. That's why it's very much stayed where it is for the purposes of this review. Again, it takes the Osiris as a starting point, but it goes in slightly different directions. If you're looking for a vast amount more power than the Osiris, you've come to the wrong place. I believe it's about 8 watts in total, more, maybe even less than that, 6. There's 168 watts into 8 ohms and 305 watts into 4 ohms. These are healthy numbers, but you can spend quite a lot less money and get more power, and more power in Class AB. This is before we touch on Class D and the enormous numbers that are banded around there. However, where the Solis puts the effort in is over and above the Osiris and over all of the smaller amplifiers like this little chap here. The output stage is enormous. The power supply arrangements are extremely thorough and the amp is stable pretty much under all conditions. It is designed to take any pair of loudspeakers that you've happened to take a fancy to and drive them to an acceptable listening level. And nothing I've done in this relatively small space has even hinted at the limits of what that amplifier can do. In the written review that accompanies this, I go into much greater detail, and I don't really want to get stuck into it now because it just eats into time, and poor Phil, who edits these videos, has to look at various bits of filler and try and pad it out whilst I'm blabbing to the camera. But there's a lot of effort that have gone into these things. There is, for better or worse, a tendency to sort of view amplifiers through a very narrow prism of measurements. Both the Mercury and the Solace put in excellent examples of those basic measurements. What they also do is reflect the care and attention that then goes into improving their performance across lots of secondary and tertiary measurements that start to make a difference as well. These products are big metal testaments to what happens when you go beyond the simple numbers and into the more complicated ones. That being said, they don't feel like science projects. They're not intimidating. They're not daunting. This is the first Rega product I've ever tested with a display. That will appear in some of the incidental videos. It shows you what input has been selected. And thanks to the inclusion of a new and rather lovely remote control, which has direct input selection, this is actually easier and faster to use than this is. So you are not being invited to suffer for your art. And there's something very reassuring about that. One of the other reviews that I did as a sort of long-form Christmas one was a couple of years ago, was the Naya turntable and Aura phono stage. Now, the Aura isn't back here for this, which is a bit of a shame. In some ways, it would have been an interesting third box. It has technology which has been used in the Mercury to reduce its noise levels. And the Naya, as you can look at the written review of that, is broadly speaking a sort of Formula One car with a tone arm. It is unbelievably complicated in terms of material science, the engineering that's gone into it. However, it is utterly unintimidating to use. If you can use a planar one, you can use a Naya. If you can use an IO, you can use a Mercury and a Solis. There is something that I feel is unrecognised in terms of just how brilliant it is and what Rega does, that these products are so accessible and there's such a strong DNA that runs through what they do. And you're only going to be more impressed when you start listening to them. To go back to those power output figures, the Kudos Titan 505s that live here are still one of the best amounts in existence. They're not insensitive, but they benefit from being driven with a reasonable current supply. They have sung on the end of this combination. In the review, I say it's like they are 20% larger. Not any loss of control. There's just more heft, more scale, more space. They are peerless at the best of times, and just this is some of the best results I've ever had out of them. There is headroom for days. I've barely troubled this analog pot, and I don't think, unless you're watching this video from an aircraft hangar somewhere in the middle of nowhere, that you're going to get anywhere near the dynamic limits of what this pairing can do. If I'm being most critical, I would say that the DAC board, I've thoroughly enjoyed the digital stage in the Mercury. It does a number of things that I think are very, very impressive. But it's fair to say that there are digital solutions, at similar sort of price points that can do some quite special things as well. Nevertheless, having listened to it, I feel it's probably enough. And the reason for that is I'm going to wager that almost every single Mercury and Solace customer has a turntable front end of one type or another. Most likely Rega, but tests here with not Rega turntables have been equally successful. Used with a turntable and a phono stage combination that you like, just the transparency on offer here is absolutely sensational. And when I say transparency, you can hear all of the character, such as it is, or at least the traits of your turntable and phono stage. But there is still a level of forgiveness, a level of ability to avoid the worst excesses of poor recordings that makes these products incredibly special. I've got a number of records in my collection which are, frankly, they're great to listen to musically, but they're crap in pressing terms. And this duo just doesn't care. When something is exceptional, they'll let you know it's exceptional. When something is not exceptional, they'll go, oh well, and still get you to a point where you're listening to the music and not the equipment or not the limitations of the recording. That is in its own way a minor sort of feat of art, and it's something that the IO in its own little way does every bit as effectively. There is a DNA that runs through these products that if you're on board with it, and quite a lot of people are, very little else will do. These are no holds barred, technical masterpieces, but they're still Rega products, and I've still had an absolute whale of a time listening to stuff which isn't audiophile, which isn't hi-fi, which isn't going to crop up in any review, and it just means that my entire collection is on limits. And that sounds like the lowest bar going, but it's not when you deal with products at this price point. Some of them are simply too forensic and too merciless when confronted with material that isn't any good. These products aren't that. They are tremendously listenable, and the digital board feeds into being able to do something similar. You can take pretty much anything and it will do a decent job with it. They are a pleasure to live with. The moment that you've recovered from moving the power amplifier about, they are tractable. They don't get unnecessarily hot. They don't make funny noises. They don't pop or do anything weird when you turn them on or off. They fulfill all the boundaries of just being utterly benign in terms of living with them, and then they will rock your world when you turn them on and actually start listening. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with them. I'm going to be very upset when I have to give them back, and not simply because I'll have to start moving the Solis around again, but because they are genuinely excellent. It would be foolish to say there's no competition for them, because of course there is, but I suspect that a number of people will sit down in front of these at a dealer's and know in very short order that they found the last amplifier that they're ever going to buy, and I'm quite jealous of them for that. As I say, please do swing by and have a look at the whopper of a review on the site. It covers lots of extra bits and bobs. There's lots of gnarly technical stuff in there, and I go to greater lengths about trying to explain that level of forgiveness. But if you've enjoyed this little ramble through the Mercury and Solace, thank you very much for that. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. There will obviously be more content. I've been churning it out for some time now, and I've been joined by other people churning out two-channel content as well. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Goodbye.